Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at gcnlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
This is your captain speaking, John Ragan. Vincent had to step away from the mic today. He'll be back tomorrow. And you are have your dial set to usaprepares.com. It's Tuesday, which means we have Guineith Isaacs with us. Hello, Guineith.
Hello there, John. How are you this morning?
Doing pretty good. I was at a conference at the end of March. It's March 31st through April 2nd, and I was one of the speakers. And whenever you have one of those types of events, it is kind of like finals week, to put it in college terms. You just have to push and push and push, and then you're glad it's over so you can stop and try to recover a little bit.
Yep. No, I went to university, and I actually the final course that I took there at the University of Melbourne was actually learning how to be a lecturer. So I totally understand what you're going through. And it is pretty full on. And my final assessment actually was that I had to take a seminar, and I was given the floor for half an hour. And that was really, really good. I really enjoyed it, and I would absolutely love to do that for a living one day.
Well, at least this time I didn't have to travel too far. It was here in Dallas. The time before that was in Knoxville, which is quite a drive from here. Yes. Tennessee is not very long north and south, but this is east and west, and it was practically to the other side.
Oh, gosh. Yep. Yeah. Anyway, it's really interesting. I was mentioning about that lecture that I gave. It was about a topic that's very dear to my heart to this day. And I think I emailed you a bit earlier about this, and that was about living without them. And, I think that's what I'd like to talk about today.
Okay.
It's quite an interesting topic because so often when I'm talking to people about being prepared and, living off the grid and doing things in an alternative way and, raising your own livestock and vegetables and all of this sort of thing, it comes up from time to time about codes, okay? Certain areas have certain codes where, quote unquote, you're not allowed to do certain things. And do you know what? These codes really are totally artificial, and they are designed to confine us. They are designed ultimately to protect the system and to stop us from being self-reliant. And it's like this. In the suburbs, you're not allowed to keep a rooster. In a lot of suburbs, I don't know about in the US, but in Australia, in a lot of suburbs, you're not allowed to keep roosters. Why aren't you allowed to keep roosters? Because they crow. Big deal. Dogs bark and roosters crow. What makes more noise? You can see. Some areas you're not even allowed to have dogs, or you're not allowed to have certain breeds of dogs. And those tend to be the breeds of dogs that would be most useful in a grid-down situation. Like, for instance, large dogs that would actually be useful in a defence capacity. In many areas, certain breeds of these dogs are flat out banned. And if you're caught owning one, you can be, in their words, subjected to a big fine, or you can, you can suffer other penalties. And they'll ultimately take your dog away, and it will probably end up being dead in one way or another, because it's quote-unquote dangerous. Now, I've had dogs my entire life, and I can tell you that with only a very, very few exceptions, I can tell you this, that the most dangerous thing about a dog is its owner. Just like the most dangerous part of a gun is the nut that's behind the trigger. And that's just how it is. And likewise with a car. They take all the guns away from people. People still want to hurt people. So what do? They go out and they get a car. You know, you wouldn't, and I wouldn't do that. But there are people out there who, because they can't get their hands on firearms, have taken to using cars as weapons, you know. And this is it. But it all comes back to phony codes, okay, that are meant to keep us from being self-reliant and independent. In some areas, you're not allowed, quote-unquote, not allowed to have. I hate those words. Why? Says who? On what basis are you not allowed to have a water tank in your driveway, you know? The house that I was living in before, I was in the suburbs, and just about the whole neighbourhood was astounded when I got a 22,500 litre water tank delivered and planted permanently in my driveway. And you know something? The entire neighbourhood's jaws all dropped, and I got it plumbed in, and I said, that's my water supply. And I said, oh, it's for my garden. You know, and people sort of looked at me weird. I was always that weird hippie down the road anyway, but now I was a weird hippie down the road with a 22,500 litre water tank sitting in my driveway. But do you know something? I planted plants around it, and within a year, nobody even noticed it anymore. I don't think anyone even saw it, you know. But of course, you and I both know that the real reason why I put that 22,500 litre water tank in my driveway was in case there was a grid down situation, I would always have tank water. You know, and of course the roof plumbing from my roof was plumbed into it, and in the meantime it did provide a beautiful supply of water, and I had a lovely garden, and I would go at that house sometimes, and I would actually just go and sit up on my garage roof, and I would look down at my garden to see how green it was. And it was actually greener than the public park next door, you know. And that was absolutely lovely, just to go up there and just to observe my garden and to see how beautifully green it was when just about the whole rest of the district was absolutely bone dry. And you know what? This is it. We have to get away from our programming that tells us that somebody else has to tell us what to do. And that's, you know, there's a whole range of facets to that. And have you ever considered these things, John?
Oh, yes, and we've also talked about some cities here in the States that you can't even have a vegetable garden.
Wow.
You know, it's crazy that you cannot be self-sufficient. You have to rely on the government and the corporations.
That's gobsmacking. you know. So that they're gonna object to you growing some parsley and tomatoes and garlic along your front edge of your house.
And it's so crazy. And this Supreme Court decision was before I was even born. They say that you growing a tomato plant in your own backyard is interstate commerce, even if you don't sell it.
That's absolutely crazy. Do you know where such rules belong? They belong down the toilet, mate. They really do. This is, we have the right given to us by God to live and to survive, to eat, to drink, to travel, to defend ourselves. And, if God has given these rights to us, what right does any human being or any interdimensional ratbag have to tell us what we can and can't do in the matter of ordinary stuff that is required for human existence, like eating, drinking, getting shelter, and traveling? Yeah, it's absolutely crazy, And we have to break out of this programming, because ultimately this programming of codes is what keeps us all enslaved. And do you know something? Usually they're not even acts of parliament. They're just some bureaucrat or group of bureaucrats getting together over a few beers and deciding what we can and can't do with our own lives, And often when it gets down to the local government level, that local governments are not local governments usually. Usually they're actually body corporates, okay? So if you move into an apartment building, usually there's a body corporate, okay, that manages the complex.
Right. And all
the council's trying to say that the municipality is trying to say that that's the system that they're under, and it's a whole lot of rot.
Hold that thought. We'll be back after this break. This is John Ragan sitting in for Vincent today. And let me go ahead and apologize in advance if you hear a lot of noise from my end. They are doing maintenance on our apartment building today, and I am hoping that it will take until after the show before they get to replacing the window in the room where I'm broadcasting from. But you still might hear a lot of banging in the background. Okay.
Now at least we know. That you haven't got a black ops squad after you or anything.
It's not SWAT trying to break in. It's a maintenance crew.
No, that's fine. Yeah, but anyway, like I was saying, most municipalities are trying to treat you as if you hold a strata title. I don't know if they're called that in the US, but it's the same sort of, title structure that you have, for instance, in an apartment building. Okay, usually you own the air inside your little block, and the strata company actually owns the building, and, you have to pay them a fee each year, okay? But you move into a suburb and, you have supposedly freehold title to this block of land, and then along comes the homeowners association, for instance. Along comes the they don't have homeowners associations here in Australia, but they have municipal councils, okay? And the municipal councils are a body corporate, and they behave themselves as a homeowners association. So my gripe against homeowners associations, from what I've heard about them, and body corporates, and unless it's actually in an apartment building where the the body corporate has actually bought the land, has actually built the building, has actually installed the services, and so on and so forth, okay, and then sells the apartments within the building, then yes, they have every right to say we own the building and we, you have a strata title on your apartment, okay, and if you pay the strata fee, then you can live in that apartment. That's fair enough, because, the capital outlay to build an apartment building is enormous. It really is. It runs into many, many millions of dollars. They've got to hire architects, and, they've got to organise everything, and, and that's fair enough. But when it comes to a suburban subdivision, where the properties are actually sold freehold to usually individuals, and that individual, that land either has a house already on it, or at some stage at the very setup of the subdivision it's sold as bare land and then the house gets built on it, right? The Homeowners Association didn't pay for that house to get built, did they? They didn't pay for the services to get connected. They didn't pay for the garden to get put in. They didn't pay for any of that. All they might have paid for is maybe things like, sewage, things like, water and electricity past the gate, maybe cable access lines, whatever. But they didn't pay for the house, and what they're doing is that they're actually claiming an interest in your property title. And at any time in history before the 20th century, if a private body corporate had come along and tried to assert that they had that they had an interest in your private freehold alloidial paid-off title, then that individual would fight tooth and nail to say, like hell you have. I'm sorry, you know what I mean. You get my point.
And we'll continue this after the break. This is John Ragan sitting in for Vincent today. A lot of people think that Texas is a nice, free place, and I have to admit it's better than places like the People's Republic of California. But it was, I think, last year that Becky and I were looking at property to try and get out of the Metroplex. And this is a very rural area, and there were deed restrictions. And we couldn't even have chickens there, except on a temporary basis for a school project.
Wow. That's absolutely amazing. That's gobsmacking, actually. And like I say, the rules are not there for your benefit. They're absolutely not. And, the so-called government is not a government. It's a body corporate. And it's there for your enslavement, okay? That they actually, there's been rumours and gossips about the whole birth certificate thing and about how it's actually, a title deed to your life, and that there's, a security attached to it and all the rest of it. I don't know if that's true or not, but it really wouldn't surprise me if it was. That's the truth of it, And at some stage, we have to decide whether we are going to continue to go along with this, or whether we are going to, not in any big way, but do a Gandhi. Okay? And you know what a Gandhi is? Oh, I'll tell you. It's, early on in the 20th century, the British ruled India, and actually they ruled it with an iron fist. And in a lot of rural areas, the country was very poor. It was highly salted, and the only way that the local people had of making a living was salt farming, okay? That is where you go out on the mudflats at low tide and you collect salt crystals and you put them in a basket and you take them to market and sell them. And the British imposed a tax on the salt, okay? And it was making it plain uneconomical for the woman to go out and collect the salt and earn a meager income. This is a tiny amount of money that they were earning, but it was really the difference between life and death for them, okay? And, you know, it's very much like at the foundation of the United States. What was it, a 1.5% tax on tea? That triggered the Boston Tea Party, where all of well, today we would call them protesters, dressed up as Native Americans and chucked all of the tea boxes into the harbour. That's about how it went, isn't that right?
Pretty much so.
And if you think that was over a 1.5% tax, and how much are we taxed now? And for what? You know, here in this country we have a sales tax on everything except for food and essential medical items. Okay? It's 15% across the board. That's on top of an income tax, which is for the average household income 50% income tax. You heard me right, 50% income tax. And, you know, you've got people who, I actually looked up on the Australian Bureau of Statistics on their website, and they said that the poverty line in this country is $800 a week. And if you're earning less than $800 a week, you're in poverty in this country. The reason is because the government takes half of it, and, you know, puts it in their kitty because, you know, that's 50% tax rate on, you know, I think it's over about $40,000 a year, which would equal around about $800 a week. Because at one time, if you were earning $800 a week, you'd be practically a millionaire. But now, you're earning $800 a week and you're barely getting by. And it's like this. We would have, aside from the government payment that I get for the fact that I have 2 sons, which is $600 a fortnight, I have, you know, I read cards, and I would get maybe $400 or $500 a fortnight reading cards. Now, how can I do that and live? Very simply, because I absolutely refuse to pay into their system, because I can see that it is nothing but a corrupt cartel. If I had to pay into their system, I'd be completely impoverished. I really would be, you know, because I refuse to pay into it. And you know something? It's amazing. You say this publicly, you say it on the internet, you say it on radio shows, and you should check the comments section on Ron Gibson's channel tomorrow and watch the trolls come out to play when I say I refuse to pay into their system, because they, you know you're flying over target. You get the flack. But do you know what? I've gotten to the point where I just don't care anymore, because this is a system that multiple times has tried to destroy me, has tried to destroy my children, has tried to take my land off me, has tried to take my animals off me for no good reason, you know, other than that, you know, if you've got a dog you're somewhat defended. If you've got land, then you're never going to be totally impoverished, homeless, and starving, okay? It's that simple. Security of tenure. You cannot have prosperity without it, you know? And dogs. If you've got a dog and it's a hunting dog, you can go and get yourself a feed if you know how to go hunting with it, you know? At the very least, you've got the best security system that you could ever imagine, and you can actually sleep at night if you've got at least one or two dogs, because they may sleep, but they will always have their ears open, and you will never ever be caught unawares. You know, this is it. We have to get away from their enslavement, and the only way that we can get away from their enslavement, okay, is drop the shackles from our minds. Stop paying the salt tax. Stop paying the tea tax. Why should you have to pay somebody else money to do stuff that is your ordinary human right, like to go to the grocery store and get shopping, you know, get food that you can't produce yourself? Okay, there's, you know, I like my cups of tea, but it's just not a suitable climate here for growing it. So I have to buy it. You know, it's that simple. You know, you know, that the most suitable answer that I have for this is go and listen to a guy called Derek Jensen. I don't agree. He has a bit of a violent slant on his view of the world, okay? He's into blowing up dams. Mate, if you blew up dams around here, it would just be the stupidest thing ever. You would not be able to live here without the dams. The dams hold the water because sometimes it doesn't rain for 6 or 7 months at a time, okay? You can't go destroying dams. I would not advise anyone to do the more violent end of what Derek Jensen has to say. But certainly his view on taxes was an eye-opener for me. You know, this is ordinary human activities that they are extorting money out of us so that we can do. And it's not fair, and it's not right, and why should we anyway? It's just disgusting how people, you know, buy into this, and then they, if you open your mouth about it, then they claim that you're not pulling your weight, that, you know, that you're a slacker, that you should be taking your share of the load, and who's going to pay for the system anyway. But I'll tell you what, I can sense we're probably heading quite closely into a break. I'll go into how we could organise things differently after the break.
Oh, we have about 2 or 3 minutes right now.
Okay, no, that's fine. I'll give a bit of a sampler just before then. When I was growing up in Rotorua in New Zealand, okay, I grew up among the Māori people, the Maori people, as you would say in America, okay? And 500 years ago, they came across to New Zealand from Hawaii in big canoes. And they weren't the original indigenous people, but they live a very much indigenous type lifestyle, quite similar to what the Hawaiian people live.
And we have the music, so we'll finish up on the other. We'll finish up on the other side of the break. John Ragan at the controls today. Guineith, please continue.
Now, what I learnt from the Māori people in New Zealand when I was growing up there, they had a society that a short time before, you know, my time, I'm talking about 150 years before I was walking the earth, the Māori people had major problems in their society. okay? They had what could only be described as a massive, massive civil war, where some tribes, 90% of the tribe was wiped out, okay? And this is actual history, and they were looking at basically complete societal collapse. They were at the stage where they had wandering gangs of headhunters and cannibals wandering the forest, looking for members of the opposing tribe to take them, enslave them, and eat them. So this was not coming off an ideal base, okay? This is coming off a base of total societal collapse. They were just about at the point where they couldn't even do vegetable gardening outside of their little individual village because the other tribe across the way would probably come in and destroy their vegetable gardens. That's, and they only, by the time Captain Cook got there, they only had about 3 or 4 different varieties of vegetables that they'd brought with them from Hawaii left. They had one variety of pumpkin, they had one variety of zucchini or cantaloupe, they had, they had one variety or maybe 2 or 3 varieties of sweet potato, and they had an assortment of wild herbs. They had wiped out what remained of the large ratite-type birds that were there, something like a very, very large emu, okay, even larger than an ostrich. They had totally wiped them out. And the people who were there before had reduced their population, the population of the moa, which were like the very large emu, which were the staple food animal, enormously as well. But you know something, by the time I got there, the Māori people had recovered a lot of the heart that they had, okay? In the beginning, if you ever get the chance to go to Hawaii, I've never been to Hawaii, but I would absolutely love to go there because from what I've seen, it's like paradise on earth, okay? And actually in the Māori language, and I take it in the Hawaiian language as well, the very word Hawaii means paradise, okay? In Māori, it means paradise. Their word is Hawaiki. It's a different dialect. But from the little bits of Hawaiian that I've heard, I can understand bits and pieces of it, and it seems to be a very, very close dialect to New Zealand Māori language. But you know, what it boils down to is this. Aroha, you would say in Māori. In Hawaiian, you would say aloha. And it's the aloha that comes from God. If you allow that to govern your behavior, then you will have a beautiful society.
And we need to say aloha to this hour. See you on the other side of the break. This is your Captain John Ragan. Vincent will be back at the mic tomorrow. Welcome to hour number 2 of USA Prepares. And it'll be this time next week when in the United States our income tax returns are due to be filed. Oh
joy.
there's a foundation here that has what they call Tax Freedom Day, and they have not announced the 2017 date yet. But last year, that date was April 24th. They took the total spending for federal, state, and local government, and that would require 31% of the nation's income. So we're working nearly a third of the year just to handle current expenses of government. And of course, they're not taxing that much because there'd be a revolt. And to make up the difference,
Well, you know something?
they're
Like I
borrowing
said,
money.
you're better off than in Australia, because here most people are paying 50% income tax. That's not even sales tax of 15% on top of that. That's not even counting property rates. That's not even counting motor vehicle registrations and driver's licenses and all of the other bits and bobs of taxation.
Let me give you part of the rest of the story.
Okay.
We have unfunded liabilities for Social Security and Medicare, and there's various numbers you see on that. There's one that's in the 70s of trillions of dollars that's in the financial report of the United States government, but the auditors will not sign off on that because it does not conform to generally accepted accounting principles. And on the high side, you see over 200 trillion that Professor Kotlikoff puts out on an annual basis. And that's based on the alternate scenario from the Congressional Budget Office, which is a more realistic picture than what the Social Security trustees do. But you have to realize that either one of those numbers, that's how much you would have to invest today at 5.7% interest in order to pay what's promised. So if you want to just keep Social Security and Medicare from getting deeper in the hole, in addition to what they're currently paying or currently spending at government, you now need more than 100% of all income for the year.
Yep. Well, you know what? It's like my dad used to say. He used to say, you know something? Communism's a wonderful idea. There's only one problem with it. It doesn't work.
Yeah, sooner or later you run out of other people's money.
Yeah, that's right. That's what Maggie Thatcher said. And I think around about the time that he was saying that was about the time that Maggie was actually the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. And so communism was a topic that was very much in the news. And I think I've mentioned before that my dad was actually a Labour man, and in the Antipodes, being a Labour man means that you're a shade of red. And being a shade of red in this part of the world means something different to it being in America. It means being communist, basically. But it doesn't work. And that's the simple fact of it. You know, I'll tell you what does work. As I mentioned before the break, aroha. Okay? There is a way of structuring a society around respect, aroha, for the person next to you. Okay? If you don't harm them, and if you leave them alone to basically live their life, and, you know, if there's somebody that you can see is having a hard time, go and help them by all means. But to not have somebody with a stick over you making you do so is the way to be. That actually empowers people to go and fix their own lives. Because really, nobody really wants to have a horrible life. If people are given the power to go and fix their own life, make arrangements for their own shelter, make arrangements for their own food supply and water supply and energy supply, and if they are left alone, human beings will go and do that. Maybe it won't look so fancy, straight up, you know. When I was in Rotorua, I mentioned that, you know, that they'd just come out of a massive, hundreds of years long civil war. And the people were living in huts of about 50 square feet. And there might be a whole family living in this hut. You know what? There weren't any building codes, and the family was happy, and there was no point in building a bigger hut when, you know, the next tribe could come across at any moment and burn it all down. You know, you had to take that into account. It's, you know, people will make their own arrangements as it suits them. And you've got to let people do that. Another guiding principle of tribal life all over the world, this is in Hawaii and it's in New Zealand, but it's found in just about every tribal society all over the world. In Māori, it's called mana. In Hawaiian, I think it's also mana. It means respect. It means if you see somebody who is your elder, who is your parent, who is your auntie, uncle, grandma, grandpa, or even just the random little old lady down the road, you show them the respect because they've been here before you were even born. And maybe they know a thing or two. Maybe they can teach you something. Okay? So you don't leave your old people out in the dark. You know? You live in a society where everybody is expected to provide for their own old people. Okay? You recognize that old people, they have a huge amount to contribute because they have lived long enough and seen enough to be able to teach the young people something. Okay? And they are the ones who can generally raise the alarm when things begin to get a bit fascist, you know, or a bit communist or a bit dictatorial, because they might have seen it before. And like I said, my dad, he was a really clever guy. He spoke about 5 or 6 languages, and he'd studied European politics. He wasn't quite old enough to have fought in World War II. But if World War II had gone on for a few more years, then he said he certainly would have joined up. You know, just to give Adolf Hitler a beating. And you know, it's you've got to organise a society in this way on a family basis. You've got to look after your own, and you've got to have these principles of aroha, that is, you know, brotherly love, respect for your elders, and you have to have some type of rangatira, which means order of society. Okay? So that means that maybe you do have a group that meets and organises, okay, we're going to have a dam that we're all going to share. Who's got the bobcat? Okay, well, Joe down the road has got the bobcat. Okay. And Marcy over there makes a really good cup of tea and scones, so she can be in the catering. And all the rest of us fellas can get to with our shovels and we can just dig dirt, you know? But you have to have somebody making the decision there. But the problem comes when they begin to get it into their minds that in ordinary times they get to telling everybody else what to do with their own lives and their own property. You know, it's one thing to have a dam that you all share. It's quite another if, you know, the guy who organised the building of the dam begins to charge for the water. You know, that begins to become a real problem. And that's exactly the situation what we have in our country at the moment. We actually have a constitutional right to freely supplied water in this country, and constitutionally guaranteed. And to charge people for their drinking water is actually an act of high treason. because it's attempting to change the Constitution of Australia. But people forget that, and it goes back to they've allowed themselves to be hoodwinked and brainwashed. They're paying something to a private corporation that is constitutionally guaranteed for everybody in this country, and that is a supply of clean, pure, uncontaminated drinking water, which in one of the driest continents on Earth is the difference between life and death. But if, you might say, well, how could you organise society on a large scale on this basis? And I would say you could organise it very simply on a large scale on this basis, okay? Because you organise each area as a small unit. So everybody knows the local area.
We're at a break again. Back in a few minutes. This is John Ragan at the controls today. Guineith, please continue.
Okay. Yeah, I was talking about people say, well, how could you organise a large-scale society on that basis? And do you know what? How it pans out all over the world. If you go to Bhutan, which is in the Himalayas, okay, they don't have gross national product in Bhutan, okay? It's an ancient kingdom, but instead of measuring their gross national product, they measure their gross national happiness. If you go to most Bhutanese communities, they wouldn't have more than about 1,000 people living in the community, okay? And if the community gets any bigger, they go and they form another community down the road, okay? And all over the world, in tribal societies, that's how it works. And if you could imagine what a country town of 1,000 people looks like, okay, that's not a big place, is it?
Not at all.
It's the sort of place where everybody knows everybody. If there's a new family moves into town, it takes the whole community about 24 hours to figure out what sort of people they are, okay? And whether they are going to be a good fit for the community or whether they are going to be a problem. And, this is indigenously how human societies are supposed to run. And you'll find, if anybody out there in the listening audience is contemplating moving to a small country town, thinking that you'll get anonymity, I hate to pop your bubble, it's not going to happen. You're going to get way less anonymity in a small country town than what you'll ever have in the big city. There's no secrets at all. Everybody knows everything about everybody else because they're a community and they actually talk to each other, okay? But the thing is that they tend to self-organise, okay? Nobody has to wave a stick over anybody to get them to join the country fire brigade. They've always got volunteers who are able to do that duty, although it's volunteer work and although it's extremely dangerous. And if the government didn't supply them with trucks, you can guarantee there'd be some guy with an IBC cube, a water pump, and a 1-ton truck who would decide that they were going to fill in the duty. Okay? And it's probably the same in most areas of the country United States. It's the same everywhere. Humans are actually really, really, really good at self-organising, okay, to fulfill their basic needs, whether that's firefighting, whether that's dealing with an outlaw family that decides that they're going to move into town and try and dominate everybody, whether that is supplying for their elderly or their very young or widowed or single mothers the education of children. If you see humans when they're left alone, they're really, really good at that, okay? And especially when they have in their culture, as the Maori people do in New Zealand, as the Hawaiians do, as tribal societies all over the world do, they have concepts like aloha, aroha, and they have concepts like mana, respect of elders, okay, where they have concepts like rangatira, respect of proper authority. But you know something, if rangatira relies on mana, if there's no mana, there's no rangatira in traditional Maori thought, okay? The moment that you as a leader in the community abuse the mana that you have, your rangatira flies out the window and you lose the right to rule.
I'll hold that thought. And I always thought it was interesting when I was in Germany, the city hall is called the Rat House. That's so appropriate. We'll be back in a few minutes.
Their right to rule.
Vincent will be back tomorrow. This is John Ragan sitting in for him. Just to connect a dot here, we've been talking about how much government costs, and we've been talking a bit about history. And most people have just lost sight of how things used to be done. It used to be there wasn't a fire department. If something caught fire, it was the people put the fire out. There wasn't a police department. You know, we had a sheriff, and if we needed more resources, he formed a posse to go take care of the problem, and then the people went back to their lives.
I was about to go into posse comitatus.
And, same thing with, protecting the country. We're supposed to have a standing Navy, which is our first line of defense, but it was the people that was the defense, and that was part of the reason for the Second Amendment is, to protect the country from invaders as well as tyrannical governments. And now we think that we can pay somebody else to take care of our responsibilities, so we pay these governments that are run by psychopaths that think they know better than everybody else, and we have the results that we're living with today.
Yep, which is enslavement, plain and simple. Let's call a spade a spade. That's the society that we have in Australia, and I'm sure it's a society probably a bit less so that you have in the US, But, you try bucking the system. Just try not paying your property taxes. You've got to have a high level of legal skill and knowledge to know what to write when your municipality or your state comes to you and says, you haven't been paying your property taxes, and now we're going to put a lien on your land. You've got to have a level of knowledge to know how to respond to them, okay? Because otherwise, they are using their fraud and your lack of knowledge against you, okay? Because what they're doing is absolutely fraudulent, okay? Here in this country, what they're doing, if people stop paying their property taxes, they call them land rates here, but it's the same thing. They put a lien onto the property, and then they securitize that lien, and they sell it not once, not twice. I know one piece of land where that lien has been sold 7 or 8 times, which of course is fraud. If you've got a security, you're only supposed to sell it once. And that's just it, even if it's a legitimate security. But if you don't know that that's fraud, and if you don't respond when the guy turns up at the gate and says, well, this is fraud, this is my freehold allodial title land, and have the confidence to just dig your heels in and say, no, you're not doing it, this is fraud, and you're going to get you're going to get a damages suit filed against you unless you back off right now, get back in that car, drive off, and never come back, And, but that takes courage. And from what I've seen in this country, Australia, and also with my dealings with Americans, it seems that courage among the ordinary populace is often sadly lacking. And so they find themselves enslaved. When there's no need for it. If they would only stand up for themselves, they would have their own country. They would have it run in a way that was just and fair and didn't run them into the hole to the tune of $200 trillion. And that's how it is. You are being ripped off. The emperor has no clothes. And if you as a nation, if we Australians as a nation do not stand up now and say, this no further, back off, then we're not going to have a country left. We're absolutely not going to have a country left. Because as it is, all of our resources are getting sold from under us. The homelessness levels are just astronomical in this country. And then we're importing a bunch of people who are not high-quality people who could most accurately be described as a Trojan horse army, as far as I can see. And I know that the same thing's happening in the US. It's less so here in Australia. It's less so in the United States. But even with the smaller degree of immigration, it's still problematic because just open the newspaper, see what's happening in Melbourne, see what, the profile. Is the government so fond of profiling people? Why don't they profile the people who are going and running their cars through the middle of pedestrian areas in the middle of CBDs in Australia? Why don't they profile them and see, on average what people they are? They won't. They have it as a government policy, for sure, yeah, but it's being targeted at the wrong people. It's being targeted at people who, by and large, are completely harmless, who only want to stand up for their own rights. And really, with regards to anyone else's behaviour, if it doesn't affect them, they couldn't care less. And that's about some of it. And because of that, this country is becoming a very, very unsafe place to live if you happen to be in any sort of major city or town, unless you're right out in the countryside, in a town with a population, once again, of less than about 1,000, okay, that you have been in for a little while, enough to settle into the community and for the community to realise that you're actually a beneficial, good, hard-working, lovely person. That's it. Unless you're in a place like that, this country's very, very quickly becoming not a nice place to live. And I'm so glad that I chose all those years ago to move right out into the middle of the bush, into the middle of the forest, because there is no way now that I would even live in the small country town. It's just getting absolutely ridiculous. But anyway, that's how some of it is here, okay? And people have to take responsibility for themselves, first of all. They have to really study how Indigenous tribal peoples live, how they deal with their problems, because a lot of the time when people first get to studying Indigenous societies, they think that they have no problems. Believe me, they have problems. I watched a video of it was a documentary. I think it was put together actually by National Geographic. But it was about a woman, and she moved from the middle of London, and she moved to off the coast of Papua New Guinea. And she moved in with a woman to see how the woman in this remote island indigenous village lived. And guess what? The woman that she moved in with had recently gotten a divorce. The divorce was agreed to by the elders of the village council because her husband was violent. So, but the community realised that this woman, the elders in the community realised that this woman was actually safer and better off, and her children, without her husband. And so they granted her, she petitioned the elders of the council of this island for a divorce, and they granted her the divorce, and they ordered the man to leave the island and go to live with family members on another island. And do you know something? That's a society that had a problem that solved it without going to the central government of PNG for an answer. You know, they had no central authority from Papua New Guinea there. Okay, they just didn't. And you know something? That's how we all ought to be. You know, we can solve our own problems. And this woman who came from the middle of London, she was so stressed. She was actually from a PR firm, okay, supposedly telling everybody how wonderful her clients were. And she got there and she was so on edge. She was just so stressed out. And you know something? The first couple of weeks, she spent arguing with the head of the household. She said, "This is so hard. I've never been to such a hard place in all my life." And then she sat back and she realised that everybody just loved her. They all felt so sorry for her. And, you know, she realised that the rules that they had were actually rules with a reason. And she said, okay, I'm just going to go along with these rules, even though I don't agree with them. And then she began to see the benefit of them.
And we're upon another break.
Simple rules, like wearing a skirt.
And we'll be back in a few minutes. John Ragan at the controls today. And just want to make a quick comment. Because of the way that I have to connect a guest host, occasionally we get a situation where the guest cannot hear the music, so it might sound a bit strange to you. You know, I hear the music. Why doesn't the guest? And
that does happen sometimes.
And that's
that. I cut off, and then the ads come on. Then I figure it out.
So, just to explain that, it's not anything nefarious, and Guineith, just
not that cutting me off or anything.
Just please continue.
Yeah, okay. Now, I'm aware that this is the last segment, okay? There's one last thing, which is most important of all. All humans are meant to live in a tribal way. That's just how we're wired. That's just how we're designed. Okay? I'm just trying to get my fire started again. So, but you know what? There's one thing that is also universal through every tribal society on Earth, well, every tribal society that I've studied, in every indigenous community. And in Maori, you would call that Te Wairua Tapu. Okay? Te means the, Wairua means spirit, and Tapu means holy. Figure it out. The Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is there. The Native Americans call him the Great Spirit. He's there all through creation, holding it all together, ordering everything for the best benefit of the whole of humanity, and also for the individuals who are aware of him and seek to work with him. It is the Spirit of God. It's the Spirit of God that holds it all together, who makes it all connect. It's the reason why divination works, okay? And I know divination works. I work as a fortune teller, okay? I know that it works. You know something? When you begin to see that, you gain a respect for tapu. That means holiness, you know? That means realizing that the creatures around you, the trees, the birds, the insects, all of them are there because they're a manifestation of the life of God through all of nature. And everywhere, every indigenous tribal society that I've studied, and you know, that's quite a number of them, from all over the world, from the Himalayas, from the Amazon, from New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, Africa, everywhere. It's and when you've got a concept that's that widespread, you can be pretty sure it's true. Okay? You have a respect for the way that things are naturally, and when you begin to see something coming in and upsetting the natural order, like for instance, here's a modern example of the natural order. I want to get into my ute and I want to drive down to the grocery store and spend money for groceries to bring them back here to feed my kids. The Chinese would call that, you know, the Spirit of God motivates even pigs and fish. That's true, you know. A pig doesn't have to have anybody to tell it that it's a good thing to go and dig its nose into the forest to dig some roots up to eat. And the fish doesn't have to have anyone to tell them it's a good thing to go and swim over there to eat the smaller fish. It just knows. And that's the end of the show, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Gosh. Well,
Thanks for being with us.
All. And I look forward to speaking to you all again next week.
Remember, class, honesty and integrity. What happens next is up to you.